Welcome to Muscular Minds Podcast, where we want to build mental toughness and resilience for you, your family, your faith, and your future. Thanks for joining us today.
All right, welcome into Muscular Minds. This is your host, Jared Day. We're excited to have you here with us. We've got a special guest tonight. We are going to talk specifically about mothers and daughters and how that can be resilient and transformed in the way we interact. Here at Muscular Minds, we really focus on resilience and being mentally fit and confident. So our guest tonight is Erica Thomas. She is a licensed psychotherapist. She also is a certified mother and daughter coach. And so she has her own coaching practice, and we're excited to hear it tonight, Erica.
Hi, Jared. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and have this conversation with you. My name is Erica Thomas. I'm a licensed therapist and a certified mother-daughter coach. I am the owner of Vida Nova Mother-Daughter Coaching, which I had for a while. I've been a therapist for over 20 years. And, um, you know, people ask me, what brought you to mother-daughter coaching? So first of all, I have my own story of, a mother-daughter story. When, growing up, I had a very complicated relationship with my mom. Really sparked more so as I was a teenager, then got more complicated as it went. In doing my own work in therapy myself, I realized just how much my mom really created the foundation for me. I inherited a blueprint that she inherited. And she inherited a blueprint that my grandmother inherited. So over the years, I was really able to see how these generational patterns were passed down from mother to daughter to me. And my mom, just coming into motherhood, she had a really, really tough childhood. My grandmother did break a lot of cycles, but it did involve my mom getting hurt. And she knew when she was going to become a mother that she was going to intentionally break some cycles. And she broke a lot of cycles. However, there were cycles that she didn't break, ended up causing hurt and the same hurt that she experienced. So, this is saying you don't know what you don't know. So, had my mom known what the patterns were that she was passing down, I think she would have been a lot more intentional as to what she brought into her motherhood to parent me and
So
my
Erica,
sister.
I have a question. It sounds like mother and daughter relationships can be complicated, obviously. Is there certain things that are unique to mothers and daughters that maybe the rest of us don't really fully grasp or understand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great
What would
question.
that be?
Yeah. So, I think mothers and daughters, when that relationship becomes complex, they don't feel seen and heard by each other. But if we peel back another layer, the reason why they don't feel seen and heard is because of these generational patterns that are passed down from mother to daughter. Like I had mentioned earlier. So a lot of these mothers and daughters don't know what those patterns are. Um, they don't have a name to those patterns. They can list some things that have been passed down, including intergenerational trauma, which, unless there's some intentional healing done around that, but to really put a name and a language behind those patterns, they don't know what they are. So what they're doing is they're actually fighting around these unhealthy generational patterns that are being passed down. So, and I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
You know, in in a cultural sense. And I'll speak from a Hispanic population because I'm Hispanic myself. But, one of the patterns is the culture of female service. And basically what that means is it's the expectation that a woman is supposed to be of a certain service to the family. And that expectation is being passed down from generation to generation. For some women, it's sacrificing their dreams for taking care of the family or because they have to help the family pay bills. So they have to go to work. They have to forego college. They have to forego their dreams.
Cool. what would be the result? Hey, if you don't live up to that expectation, or if you don't meet that expectation, am I hearing that maybe there's a family or mother's kind of judging or resenting that choice? What does that dynamic look like?
Yes, I think that, you know, I sometimes get from mothers and daughters when I'm working with them of, well, that's just the way it was back then. We did what we did. But if you peel it back, and you really ask them, but were you happy about it? And all of them would say no, but they would say, but that's just the way it was. And that's a way in their minds of reconciling it. And then there comes this generation of women that says, I'm not doing it.
Mm.
I'm not doing it. No, I am going to college. That's not what I'm going to do. And I appreciate my family, but this is what I want to do. And then you have this mother that says, well, how could you? This is the way we've always done things, you know? Um, and and hence enter comes in some of those complicated dynamics that come in that create estrangement, create distance, create disconnection between a mother and a daughter. Now, if you don't put a name behind those generational patterns, then you don't understand.
If you don't fit a certain role or an expectation, sometimes the consequences are the family really maybe is disconnected, or does it looks down on you, or whatever you're going to talk about, disconnects from that person. And it sounds like that's really hard. It strains those relationships between mothers and daughters, and maybe the family, if you didn't carry on this sacrifice for your family.
That's exactly right. For instance, you have this generation of women that says, I'm not going to be silent anymore. You just need to be quiet. You need to, sit there and look pretty. That's kind of an extreme, but sometimes that has happened.
Okay.
Or you can't be so needy, or you can't express your needs because nobody will want you until a generation of woman comes along and says, I'm done. No, I'm going to say something because I'm tired of it. I'm tired of seeing you, mom, suffer this way. I was tired of seeing grandma suffer this way. I am now suffering this way, and I don't want, if I have a daughter, to suffer in the same way. So, like for me, for instance, in my mother-daughter story, I've been breaking those generational cycles, and not intentionally, but when I think about it back, since I was a teenager. And I remember just, one particular instance too, where I came back my freshman year from college, and it was a surprise visit. I came home surprised. My parents were excited, but we're sitting at the table. My mom, there was always the customary thing where my mom would serve my dad his plate and would have everything ready for him right in front of him. And she was busy running around and didn't give him a fork, just totally forgot a fork. And he's like, hey, hon, can I have a fork? And I looked at my dad and I said, Dad, you have legs. You can go get a fork. So and he looked at me and he didn't get upset or anything. And my mom got real quiet. And he was like, yeah, I guess I could get a fork.
He didn't realize that he was capable.
Oh, no, sometimes they become so entrenched and so part of the family culture.
In 2026, more of these roles, I think people are going to redefine them. And some of that is great. I think people are like, hey, I don't want to be silent, or you're going to cook, I'm going to clean, or vice versa. I also think that can be complicated too, because now we have to talk more if these roles are changing, if these dynamics are changing in the family. If this person is doing something that wasn't done before in a different generation, now we really have to talk this out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it is. And I think sometimes too, that's definitely where mothers and daughters can lock horns, is just that generational gap where you do have that generation of women that says, I'm done with this. And then mom says, but this is the way we've always done it. And um, how could you how could you change it up on us? Or how, just really getting upset that the daughter is changing homeostasis for the women in the family. And that brings all sorts of baggage with it, right? It brings emotional manipulation. It brings in, you know, guilt tripping and gaslighting. And, that just makes a relationship just that much more disconnected and that much more unhealthy. I one of the other reasons why I did this work is because over the years of being a therapist, just in working with women who would come to me feeling stuck, inevitably that we would always go back to mother-daughter dynamics. There was always, and it was a varying degree, some it was more so than others, but inevitably we'd always touch on mother-daughter dynamics. And it was just fascinating how a mother-daughter relationship really shapes the way a woman navigates her world. The mother is the first example of what it is to be a woman. So she creates the foundation for a woman, for her daughter, on how to be a woman, how to be a mother, how to be a friend, how to be a professional, how to be a spouse, right? How to be in relationship with the self and what that's like. And eventually women, they find their way and they figure out their way who could give their daughters a positive blueprint, have daughters say, I want to be like my mom, right? Because I've heard a lot of women in my time, and the women I've worked with, is I don't want to be my mother. I've heard that time and time again. But how nice would it be to say, I want to do things exactly like my mom wants to do?
Now, I'm changing the dynamic. I'm saying, no, I'm going to do things different. I'm going to do different roles. If I'm the mom, that feels incredibly like everything I taught you, you're kind of like throwing back on me, rejecting my teaching, rejecting what I've taught you since you were small. Yeah, it's incredibly hard for the mother to feel that from her daughter. I mean, is that correct? That's what it seems like it would be like.
Sure. No, there is a certain dynamic. It can be really sad for the mother to see the daughter rejecting all of these things that she is teaching her. That said, the daughter is not necessarily rejecting. She's evolving. She becomes a more evolved version of the mother. And that's the way I like to look at it. And not that she is forgetting everything where she came from. She's actually building upon that
Nice.
and really creating a better version of herself that ultimately the mom is really proud of. I mean, in general, I think that us as parents, we want our kids to do well and we want them to do better than us. You know, usually mothers are proud of that. However, along the way the daughter is showing it is can be really hurtful. So if we can teach our daughters and have a blueprint where can give them and impart in them whatever we're going to impart in them in a healthy way, but leave room for individuation, then, these daughters grow up to be much more evolved. One thing I love about mother-daughter work is that not, it teaches the women in that dynamic, not just to improve their mother-daughter relationship, but it also teaches them to gain a better understanding of themselves,
Mm.
why they're behaving the way they do. So are they protesting daughter's individuation, daughter's rejection of whatever she feels like she's being rejected about teachings, herself, whatever it is? What is it really about? Right? And it usually comes down to there is a component of emotional starvation in the mother. So that sometimes mothers try to get that fulfilled through their daughters. If my daughter accomplishes everything that I've taught her, then I myself, that makes me feel good. That makes me feel good.
So they feel completion from watching their daughter succeed. So I am curious, what does a healthy mother-daughter relationship dynamic look like?
Yeah, I actually was asked that question earlier this week. And I think every mother-daughter pair is individual, right? First and foremost, it has to feel good for both of them, right? It has to be a dynamic that is a mutual dynamic where if they're in each other's lives, it's in a way that feels good, right? There are components, yes, such as a healthy mother-daughter relationship is when the mother and the daughter, particularly an adult daughter and a mother, when they're able to communicate with each other and connect with each other as woman to woman. Oftentimes, moms, when they still try to parent their daughters are 35 and still telling them how to do things, and, um, so mothers learning really how to gracefully shed and letting go of that mothering and knowing that daughter is going to take care of her world in her way, even if it's not in the way that mom envisioned, but if it's in her way, and really being able to make space for each other, coming from a place of curiosity and seeking to understand rather than getting defensive with each other when they're at odds. So, um, that's a huge thing that mothers and daughters who are in conflict have a difficult time with. They don't know how to receive each other's perspectives. One tries to get the other one on their side, and if they don't, then they're rejecting them. The same thing on the other side with daughter and mother. They try to get each other on each other's side, and it doesn't work. Or they're trying to argue. It's kind of like a courtroom. They're trying to argue their point beyond the reason of a doubt. But the thing is that in a relationship, we're not in a courtroom. It's a lot more complicated. So it's about getting curious with each other and seeking to understand and knowing that at the end of the day, both of them may still continue to have different opinions, but knowing that that has to be okay and that they will be okay even if they're different in their stances.
It sounds like what you're saying is make room for the other person's feelings, beliefs, even if they're a little bit different than our own. We appreciate and make space for some of those differences in the relationship.
That's exactly right. And what I call it is emotional reality. Whereas like factual reality is a reality based on facts, right? Our age, the weather, our occupation. Emotional reality is our one's own subjective experience and perspective of the world. And that is colored by a lot of things. It's colored by, past traumas, beliefs, just your story that you bring into this world. So we all have a certain way that we see the world. And being able to honor that and respect that is really important.
It sounds like you try to do that in your coaching, bringing two people together that have a lot of history or maybe some conflict and try to teach them how to get the most out of that relationship. And I'm assuming if they're in front of you, they both want to enrich that relationship.
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. They're the mothers and daughters that I do end up seeing, because I do go a bit through a vetting process. I do want to make sure that they are ready for coaching, right? And mother-daughter coaching is doing very different from, say, therapy, right? They have to have done some sort of work for themselves, meaning if they had some trauma in their history, they need to be able to know, they need to be able to have been able to process it. Have to know how to be able to regulate their bodies, because when we're having mother-daughter conversations, there are some raw things that come up. And if we don't know how to regulate ourselves and allow ourselves to become flooded, and because we haven't quite worked through our own traumas, then we end up really hurting the relationship. So it is, when we're talking about bringing them together and talking about their perspectives and sharing their perspectives, they do have to be at a certain place. But when they get there, it's really a beautiful thing to see when you can see a mother who says, okay, I don't understand it, but okay.
If I come to your program, like let's say the mother and the daughter coming program, is this like a 5 week, 10 week? How does this usually work when they come see you?
The program that I have is a 12-week program. And, so there is a beginning and an end, which is really great. And during this 12-week program, I really work with them so that they can get a good foundation from which they can build upon after we're done with our work. So another word, what that looks like is, we talk about the science behind the connection and the attachment between the mother and the daughter, because there is a science behind that. And one thing I love about science is that it takes away the chalking it up to character flaws or to weaknesses or taking it personal. Is our bodies do react biologically a certain way for, in different situations. So understanding that, then we talk about values. There's a values-based component. Of course, we do the communication exercise that we work on as well. And we talk through boundaries. So we also talk through, of course, the mother-daughter history, which is a huge component of it.
A particular topic or leap that seems to be more challenging or more difficult for mothers and daughters?
I think the most difficult part is when we really get into the crux of communication. That's definitely a very experiential exercise. And, we start off with something really mild and then we slowly, but, just over the weeks, we then go into more triggering events that they have to talk through. But once they're able to really hold each other's space, my favorite part is once they're able to do that, then we go into that mother-daughter history and they talk about the unhealthy generational patterns. They have this map where they look at 3 generations of women before them and what happened. And the conversation is just so, so rich and so beautiful. But I think that is the most difficult part though, Jared, the exercise itself and really the rubric for which that I use, I think, can be at first difficult because they're very quick to it's very easy to go into defense mode. It's just
Right.
our bodies naturally to survive, we want to go into defense mode. So, however, what I notice is sometimes the defense mode is, let me tell you why I'm right and why not just why I'm right, but the component of let me tell you why I did not mean to hurt you. And but because they're so busy trying to defend, the mother or the daughter just doesn't hear them and they feel unseen and unheard. So they don't feel loved by their mother and their daughter in the end. So, yeah.
And that, I'm guessing that's the piece that really breaks or strains the relationship is when they're not feeling seen and heard by the other one.
Absolutely. And just like in my training that I did, for specifically for mother-daughter attachment, right? It's the mathematical equation is feeling unseen plus feeling unheard equals feeling unloved. So therefore, if you flip it around, if you feel seen and you feel heard, then you feel loved. So really the idea here is getting them to engage in the way where they do feel seen and heard so that they can feel loved. And it's all in the way in which they communicate. They can still share their points across. It's just shared in I just teach them how to just come across in a different way, in a more productive and constructive way, where the person who is speaking knows that the person who is hearing them across from them is really taking in and listening and trying to understand. So naturally, it creates that emotional safety between them both.
What would you tell us is men as brothers, sons, husbands, fathers? How do we navigate the dynamics of a complicated mother-daughter relationship? Because sometimes, whether you want to or not, we may feel drawn into it in the middle, something of that nature. What would you tell us? What advice would you give us?
Mm, hmm Yeah, I think that's a great question because I think oftentimes when we think of the mother-daughter relationship, we forget that there is also possibly a father in there somewhere, right? Or a husband witnessing and trying to navigate this. So, really what I say is you can call me and I can help them, just your wife and your daughter, of course. But um, also, too, in that moment, I think it's definitely not taking sides. I would not say listen to your mother, or listen to your daughter. But I would also not necessarily. Um, I think it's basically just bringing them together and just really asking them, what is your perspective of this? What is your perspective of this? Right? And what is the reason why you can't accept each other's perspectives? Right? And so ultimately what the husband slash father is saying is they're seeing a mother and a daughter who are not feeling seen and heard by each other. So both of them have something to say, but it's really kind of really, you know, getting their perspectives. What is your perspective of this? What is your perspective of this?
So you're saying basically part of it is trying to help our wives or mothers or daughters feel seen and heard by each other in as much as we can. Because I think a lot of husbands, brothers, fathers, you're just gonna like hide out. They don't want to be around that. They don't want to be around conflict. But what you're saying, there's an opportunity to bring peace and healing in our own way as we can.
Exactly, exactly. And what I say is, definitely don't try to be the professional about it. Don't think that that don't place yourself in that, and don't put that pressure upon yourself that you are going to be the person that is going to bring the both of them together, because that's a lot of pressure on you, right? As the father, as the husband, heck, even as the brother, right? It's not anything that it is a very unique dynamic, and the mother-daughter relationship tends to be one of those where it's like it's hot. It's a hot dynamic that people do not like to touch. So, but if there's a moment where, after they are calm, and you cannot do it in the moment when they are in the heat of the moment, their brains are not processing in that way. They're not processing in a logical way. So what I would also recommend is for the father to, um, you know, go hug the daughter and say it's going to be all right. Right. Not say, your mother is wrong, and then, you're right. She shouldn't have done this, whatever. But it's more so just being there in the moment and just saying, I'm so sorry, honey, that this is happening. And, just providing that space. Same thing for the wife, saying, it's okay, hon. I know you're struggling with this, and just hugging her, not necessarily offering solutions. Cause I think men sometimes quickly jump into that and want to go into fix it mode. There's the protective part that just comes out, and
Right.
they want to fix it, right? So it's more so at the very beginning, if it's really hot and it's really tense, just go to them, hug them. I mean, they don't even have to say anything, right? They don't have to offer advice. Just hug them, right? And just hug them. If you want to say something, just say it's gonna be all right.
Well, I think instead of fixing it, the solution may just be listening and hugs and trying to bring the family back together.
Exactly. So I yeah, I mean, the more I talk about it, Jared, I think that for fathers and for men in that family, it's more so just providing that kind of that, I guess you would call it containment, if you will, where that it's going to be all right. So,
Reassurance and support.
right, exactly. Safety, just that, sense of just a gentle approach and a gentle essence about them, I think would be just really helpful. So trying to fix it, not, if you do want to talk about those perspectives, then you can. But that's where a professional comes in, and they can do the work.
Awesome. Erica, what advice would you give mothers and daughters as kind of a final word as far as like their relationship, their dynamic? It's clearly a complicated thing. You're talking about it tonight. And I know it's a heavy burden for a lot of women. What advice would you give?
So what I say to, the mothers and daughters out there is that you have a relationship that has a powerful dynamic of generational change. And if you were able to come together, right, and learn how to and learn how to connect and learn how to communicate. There is always hope, but in doing this work and doing mother-daughter work, um, you have a significant power of creating generational change for the women in your wake. And I think that's why the mother-daughter relationship is so important. The mother does create the foundation for the daughter. She creates that blueprint. But wouldn't it be wonderful to have a blueprint that you can inherit, that future generations of women in your wake can inherit, that can be healthy and they can be free from the pain that you have felt before? So what I say is understand that there is a certain power behind the mother-daughter relationship. And the healthier you can get that, the healthier future generations of women will be.
I love that. Basically, it's worth doing the work. It's worth spending your time on the relationship because it's not just the current generation of women, but those that will be coming after them. And they can not just be a blessing on them, but generations, 3 generations in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm living it myself. To be able to see my own daughter through, just through my own mother-daughter history and the way it's evolved, and through my mother's own work, my work, I see it through my daughter now. And she is so fierce. She is not afraid to hold her boundaries. She's not afraid to, say something. And she does it so eloquently and so productively, and not something that I could have ever done at her age. But it makes me really proud, of our generations of women, that we were able to then have this generation of women now, young woman, who is going out in the world and doing wonderful things. But she is grounded, and she is, she has her 2 feet firmly planted in the ground.
I appreciate that. Erica, we have been excited to have you here tonight. Before we kind of let you go, do you want to tell us exactly where we can find you, what website?
So yeah, if you all want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn under Erica Thomas. I'm also on Facebook under Vita Nova Counseling / Vita Nova Mother Daughter Coaching. I am developing my presence on Instagram my handle is at the Mother Daughter Expert. My website is also VitaNovaMotherDaughterCoaching.com. So I look forward to hearing from
Awesome.
you. Yeah. Thank
Erica
you, Jared,
Thomas,
for
I
having
really
me.
appreciate you having us, letting us kind of share this wisdom with us tonight. We always about learning here at Muscular Minds, and you want to resilience, and we feel like mothers and daughters are such an important thing for everybody and with relationships. We're excited about the work you do and spending time with us tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jared, for having me. I was really excited to be here, so thanks for inviting me.
All right. And as always, you can find more podcasts on muscularminds.com. You can go to our YouTube channel or catch us on any of our social media. And we're glad you're here, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining Muscular Minds today, where strength isn't measured by how much you lift, but who you lift up. And that starts with you.